Is that a Spindrift?
This is a Spindrift, the pink
You
lemonade.
bougie son of a bitch.
It is May 23rd, 2026. This is Over the Loudspeaker, joined, as always, by Colin of the Hayward Herald. Colin, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Nestor. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Can you believe that we are now in episode 6, which means our short summer break is coming soon.
Short summer break.
I promise I'm not overly excited for it.
You just get burned out on other stuff, Nestor. This should bring you joy.
You know, we should make a plug here that we are looking for volunteers as whether it's for contributing pieces to the Hayward Herald or contributing art for forthcoming zines. So it's got to be Colin, you're working on the next zine, or
it's already at the printer, my friend.
Already at the printer. And we're looking for volunteers to help us produce this very special program of Over the Loudspeaker, which at the moment is currently ran, produced, edited. All the magic happens in a one-stop shop, which is Nestor's house. And you don't have to you don't have to be at my house to help out, but you can definitely help out, and it would be much appreciated. And make our content go a lot farther. But Colin, what's new at the Hayward Herald?
We got the zine coming out soon. We're looking to do 4 times a year, a quarterly zine now, and this is our first crack at it. We do have, you will be able to buy it in select store locations. So you'll be able to get it at our friends at Down by the Bay Nursery, who have their storefront usually in Fremont, and I believe maybe they'll sell it online. We'll see. And also at Books on B, also friends of the show. And we'll also, when the time comes, we'll send out a post and everything about how you can order one online. And as they'll be $5, and for subscribers, you get one for free at select levels of subscription. So maybe if you're into that kind of thing and you like zines, physical objects, because they're very nice, you might want to consider a monthly subscription, and you'll get yourself a zine for free, as well as supporting all the work that we do for you, our beautiful community.
Awesome. I don't know why I had this really funny thought that I was going to ask you, Colin, can we find them at the Hayward Plunge? And I just imagined a stack of wet beans like near the pool, and I don't know why that's the first...
I think the plunge is still closed, sir.
Yeah, the plunge is still closed, but a man can dream.
I mean, one day maybe when we get big enough, we get some advertisers so we can give it away. But right now we gotta sell it because printing is not cheap.
Yeah, and we also have to get the plunge open because summer is coming and people need to swim.
They're doing the best they can. It's better to have it take time than actually like physically collapse on people. So I'm hoping they do a good job.
I guess.
It is May 2026, and I'm Colin Thormoto from the Hayward Herald with your local news headlines. The City Council turns against ACUs. The Hayward City Council's attempts to make Hayward more business-friendly found a limit this month. An ordinance approving the use of accessory commercial units was delayed for at least a year due to concerns about enforcement, with many on council comparing them to street vendors despite majority support in prior meetings. Staff repeatedly said that enforcement would be easier than for street vendors, and the program could be paused if it became an issue. Quote, "What are we doing to these neighborhoods?" End quote, Mayor Salinas asked. Quote, "We've said that we are business friendly," Councilmember Dan Goldstein said in favor of the proposal. "When I think about business friendly, I think about having an impact on business opportunities for the folks that live, work, and play here." End quote. Visual and performing arts at HUSD continues despite budget cuts. Hayward Unified School District's Visual and Performing Arts, or VAPA, program lost 80% of its budget this fiscal year, but continued to provide services to students throughout the district. Quote, teachers have continued to do the work that they do with less, Ms. Figueroa said. The reductions forced the elimination of the Teacher on Special Assignment, or TOSA, professional development opportunities, district-sponsored study trips and adjudicated events, and the All-District Music Festival. But the Performing Arts Center at Mount Eden High School, which is expected to make over $600,000 in revenue this year, was a bright spot in the presentation and caused the Board of Trustees to become excited for using their facilities to help balance their consistently shrinking budget. Lastly, local election voter guide. The June 2nd primary is around the corner, and the Hayward Herald developed a voter guide for the many local offices that Hayward voters will have to navigate this year. 9 candidates are looking to fill the seat left vacant by disgraced former congressional representative Eric Swalwell, including former city council member Aisha Wahab, who has been endorsed by the majority of the Hayward City Council. Melissa Hernandez, BART board representative for a small portion of Northeast Hayward, is endorsed by council member Francisco Zermeño and Mayor Mark Salinas. We also offer information on the 6 candidates for State Senate District 10, including Scott Sakakihara, who is endorsed by Mayor Salinas, and Ann Kepner, who is endorsed by labor groups, Councilmember Syrup, and Trustee Austin Bruckner-Carrillo. If you'd like to learn more about these headlines and support the work we do, please subscribe today at haywardherald.org. The Hayward Herald is your only source of independent Hayward news, delivered to your inbox at least twice a week. Please subscribe and share our stories with your friends, family, and neighbors.
Thanks, Colin, for those headlines. Let's jump into the reversal of the ADUs?
ACUs.
ACUs. I will never, for the love of my life. What am I saying here? I will never, ever get that right. That acronym. I always want to say ADUs, because ADUs is
because we've been talking about ADUs for ages.
Yeah. So let's talk more about that reversal. And just so before I forget, plug the rest of the show here, we will get into the military equipment use policy that was presented at the Hayward City Council. You'll find that at the end of this episode. We talked to John Lindsay-Poland of the AFSC, so stay tuned for that. You'll catch that at the end, but continue listening, because you'll hear Colin and I at least jump a little bit into that conversation for a little bit. But Colin, what happened here with the reversal?
It just most of the people on council, with the exception of Councilmember Goldstein and Councilmember Syrup, made a complete 180 on the whole idea. So basically, there were a lot of people who were supportive of the idea, especially Councilmember Bonilla was tentatively supportive of it, and then suddenly had a huge reversal, really just as all the concern was around enforcement of the ordinance. Because I know Mayor Mark Salinas mentioned multiple times some concerns around how the way street vendors are, some street vendors at least, are operating in the city. He has consistently alleged that they are large operations that are coordinated by an outside person or agency, and it's all coordinated with one. It's almost like I guess in structure, it's almost like a sort of a mafia situation. But his concern was that that would then translate over to ACUs, despite the fact that because of that they said no food was allowed at all. And also the city tried to say multiple times that, again, it's much easier to cite people because there's an address attached to an ACU, where there's not an address attached to street vendors. The city manager actually just said at a meeting that I'm watching now that it's almost impossible to ticket street vendors because they just rip up the ordinance and they disappear. There's no way to make sure you get any sort of fines out of them. And then they just come back anyway. So despite all the reassurances from city staff that this wouldn't be an issue, that maybe no one will even take it up anyway, we don't know there's a market for this, we're just opening up the opportunity. and limiting it to one particular part of the city. They were all the majority of the council was against it, so it got pushed off for 6 months to a year, for better or worse.
Do you think there was any influence from local business owners in sort of changing some of the I know that the mayor, for example, was already not in favor, but at least for some of the other council members, there a big push from the business community here to reverse.
It's impossible to know for sure, but that's a definite possibility. I know there have been obviously the brick and mortar business community has been very much against street vendors, alleging that it cuts into their business and all these things. Despite the fact that there are also at the same time enormous headwinds, like economic headwinds affecting brick and mortar restaurants, which already have very thin margins to begin with. So like there's a lot going on. I have always personally felt that street vendors are kind of being used as scapegoats, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. But there was obviously no one was coming in and saying like, "Hey, I've talked to these other brick and mortar businesses." Because again, council members Syrup and Goldstein consistently referred to this as like a missing middle situation where, you know, Councilmember Syrup alleged that Casa del Toro, for example, spends $10,000 a month on rent, and that commercial rental space is really expensive. But if you're able to build a small house on your property that you can then operate out of, that's going to be a lot cheaper than buying a whole or renting for forever, and oftentimes having to put in a whole bunch of improvements on a building you don't own, a commercial space. So it's disappointing, but what are you going to do?
Yeah. Any possibility that next time we see something like this, or ACU makes its way back around, that it has a broadened scope, or that there's geographic expand, or at least geographic, because I think even when we discussed this on a previous episode, we were sort of, or at least, trying to make sense of the limited scope geographically, right? That it maybe makes more sense in other parts of the city. But would that have to be a recommendation that comes from city staff?
Well, they did actually change that, because myself we had talked about that, and I think some other council members had mentioned that being really close to where existing commercial spaces were was a little silly, because you're not really filling a need there. There's already businesses. But they changed it so that it was basically anything south of Tennyson, I think, was all open to anyone who was south of Tennyson Road would be fine if it was again, lots of limitations on it. It was for single family homes. And they have all these rules attached to them as to how you can construct it and all these things. But Mayor Salinas framed it as an equity issue, because he felt he consistently framed it as being something that was being pushed on these underserved communities, whereas other people took from a different point of view, said this was an opportunity for these underserved communities. There was no public comment that I'm aware of or that I recall, so I don't think there was any feelings from the community expressed one way or the other. Again, it's
interesting.
It's still expensive to do, so it's not like everyone's going to open it up right now.
Right. Yeah, and then one thing that comes to mind, and we can move on to the next topic after this, is just like, why go through the process when you can, I know plenty of folks who do little pop-up shops in their homes. I'm not going to say where and which location, and you can go get a bite to eat. You can go get, or like if you're like, I have friends who do picking and stuff, and they do resales. It's like, they go different places all across the Bay Area to buy things, right? So it's sort of a silly thing that still doesn't make much sense in my head of why you wouldn't want to pilot something. But hey, I'm not in elected leadership.
I mean, that was something that someone else I was talking to brought up too, that like people are already doing this, and they mentioned, people on council mentioned this too, that people are already doing this illegally, but then use that as a justification to not legalize it in some way, to try and like codify this in some way. So the arguments seemed very strange to me personally. But at the end of the day, they decided what they decided. At least many of the other recommendations, which should make things a lot nicer for businesses, did go forward. It should be easier to hold events, for example, and all this other stuff. You can read about it on the story. But yeah, it's disappointing because I thought it'd be nice. And as some people had said, like, I just want a coffee shop in my neighborhood. I live in a broadly residential neighborhood with nothing nearby. I got to drive 10 minutes to get to a coffee, and that's just like the Starbucks.
Well, Colin, we have, as you mentioned, the Hayward Herald has some coverage on the upcoming elections. Any thoughts you'd like to share about either the congressional race or any local measures that we should mention? I mean, I would love to talk all day long about the governor's race, which is I'm not. I mean, the polling shows it going one way, but I'm not 100% certain I know how this is gonna shake out in terms of the final two candidates. But yeah, any thoughts on the upcoming primaries?
I want to open this by saying the views expressed are purely my personal opinion and do not reflect the feelings of the Hayward Herald as an organization, just to be clear, as we are a nonprofit entity. But me personally, I'm allowed to have an opinion because I'm a person. And I don't know, like governor's race, it just all feels bad. It just nothing feels good. There's no candidate I'm excited about. Like, not one of them. At least not one that has any chance.
Yeah.
And like looking at the hearing the my wife and I we just voted today. And so we were looking at polling and seeing that, like, oh yeah, Becerra's leading the Dems at like 15% or something like that. But at the same time, 14% of people were still undecided.
Yeah.
And that's like the most recent polling, not to mention the fact that voter turnout is super low.
Yeah.
So it's such a gamble. This whole thing is so frustrating because it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like a good option anywhere.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the Schwarzenegger administration is the one that changed the way that we vote for governor, so that it's an open.
Yeah.
Top two candidates, doesn't matter what their party affiliation is. And it's sort of like, it's really interesting because it feels like we're playing over the scenario that we just had at the national level, and I didn't think California would ever go through something similar, but the Democrats can't seem to get out of their own way.
Oh my gosh,
it's like, hey, why don't you drop out and endorse someone? Like, if you don't have a chance, why not endorse another? You know what I mean? And like, I've seen different arguments where, especially around the issue of the two top Democrats right now, which is Steyer and Becerra, and the different arguments. And I'm not going to say that there isn't sort of like a moral imperative for voting for a particular candidate, especially if they share your values. Mm-hmm. At the same time, but there are other ways to like, or there are other things that we should be, if we sort of are putting just all of our, effort to resolve moral issues through voting. Let me tell you right now, it's a bad start. There are other things that we could be doing to, for example, end the atrocities that are happening in all over the parts of the world. Anyway, so just to say, voting, I think, should be viewed strategically, right? Like, how are you gonna use this to further advance political positions that you are interested in advancing, right? And so, like, does that mean aligning yourself with people that you wouldn't necessarily share anything else in common with at times? Maybe, right? Does that mean that you may have to put aside ethnic and racial alliances, right? I'm sort of like, I'm hearing these, sorry, now this is I'm not calling anyone out, I promise, but there is a lot of like drum beating of like, hey, do you remember the last time we had a Latino governor? It's like, no, nobody does. It was the 1800s. It's like, this could be the first time we've had a Latino governor since BOP. So anyway, it's like kind of driving me a little bit nuts, just to say, Colin. And it isn't to say that, you know, if Becerra is my last option to vote for versus a crazy Republican, guess what? I'll vote for Becerra. I'll hold my nose and I'll do it, you know, in order to keep a maniac from entering office at this point. But that's just one set of thoughts that I have that I need to put out there.
No, I totally agree with you that voting should be, in my opinion, again, I agree with you that it's viewed as a strategic thing, not a purity test. Because like the people that I agree with the most on policies and stuff have no chance of actually making it into office. Like it's just not happening, especially at governor level. Like, but even thinking at the local level, to bring it back local to the congressional race, for example, you know, given the field, I don't think the like one Republican person has much of a chance of making it. So I feel okay at that point casting my vote for someone who's probably not going to make it, but to whom I feel more ideologically aligned. And then when the actual more likely top two make it there, I'll pick out of those that I actually like. I'm happy at that point to kind of morally sacrifice my vote because I'm not worried about the Republican person making it in who's endorsed by the Handgun Association or whatever. Like, I'm not worried about that. But at the governor level, it's a lot more dicey. So yeah. I don't know. Like, but I think that's part of what got us, as you said, into this mess at the national level is that a lot of people for reasons that are personal and otherwise don't necessarily view it the same way. And there was a lot of baggage with certain of the candidates that probably harmed them in a major way. But you know, that's one of the consequences sometimes.
Right. And I don't think it's to say that the scenario, you know, I think it's hard when you're committing acts where you're maybe aiding, you know, I think it's safe to say that you're aiding acts of genocide, right? It's a little bit of a harder sell to be like, hey, this is the candidate you should vote for. Here in California, maybe it's a little bit different in terms of the current political context. Although that you could argue, right, Becerra was part of that administration and didn't necessarily resign out of disgust and repudiation of what was being done in that government. So anyway. But that's all to say, there's an election that's going to be happening in June. There is a couple candidates for Congress. I've been seeing a lot more of, God, I'm blanking on the candidate's name here. I've been getting a lot of Israni ads lately.
Oh yeah, she's financing her own campaign. She's dropped like hundreds of thousands of her own dollars into it.
Interesting. A very interesting
like if we want to talk campaign finance, the local races are actually kind of bonkers. Like Wahab, I think, is getting a lot of like union money and very much establishment, the money that you'd expect to run her campaign, right? The interesting part is that there's a forget what it's the Save Democracy PAC or something like that is going for Hernandez and has like sent a lot of mailers. Like I see a lot of social media ads for Hernandez that are all paid for by this other PAC.
Also, yep.
Israni's funding her own campaign, and then like the smaller ones like Matt Ortega, and he doesn't. I don't think he has a lot of big backers. Again, I think personally, I'm very ideologically aligned with him, but I don't think he has much of a chance. And then like for the Senate District 10 races, that one is also insane because that one's probably one of the most expensive races that's happening in the region, like outside of the governor, basically, even more than Congress, because we got Scott Sakakihara has dumped almost $1 million of his own dollars into it. Plus he's got at least 2 different PACs that are funded by like big businesses and like real estate interests that are backing him. Maybe not backing him, but they're at least against one of his primary candidates, Ann Kepner, who has
Mhm.
like all the union endorsements basically, except the building and construction trades. They're kind of
Right.
split between
Yeah.
Sakakihara and
Right.
Kepner. But like for me personally, when I see who is against a candidate, that also tells me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Of who is funding your opposition is sort of or funding your ads, right? Is that correct? You're basically opposition money is important to look at.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so I haven't spent a lot of time. I have not filled out my ballot yet.
It's okay. You still have a
Sitting
week.
sitting right next to me, and I've been avoiding it for many reasons. But I haven't been looking at the Senate race too as closely as I'd like. I've been caught up in the governor's race and
I
congressional
mean, the
race.
governor's race, I feel like, is just so far out of my hands that I'm just like, it seems bonkers. Like nothing
Well,
makes sense.
I will say something, and not to say that this isn't again. I uh, I think there are third-party candidates that God bless them, right? They're doing you know uh, important work to elevate certain platforms. I get a little bit frustrated at times with the perspective that third-party candidates take. I think as a one-time candidate myself, right? I recall sort of like the discussion of saying, like we're going to do this because we're going to elevate a certain platform. It's like, yeah, but we're also going to win, right?
Right?
Right? Like that's what we're
Right?
trying to do. And so
Right?
that's often my frustration with third-party candidates. It's like, hey, we're doing this for the visibility to put a platform out there. It's like, but you're trying to win also, right? Like that's the
Right?
that's the biggest visibility that you get is like getting into the office.
Win.
So anywho, that's all I'll say. And I think I was reading. I don't know how true this is about Butch Ware, who is not on the ballot, who was
Mm.
disqualified, I think, for by the Secretary of State for various reasons, including one of not having the right financial information, something along those lines. You can
Interesting.
read about it on Cal Matters. There's an article about that. But he posted a I don't know if it was a tweet or a social media post that he was polling actually pretty high, apparently, before enough to get him on a debate stage, according to
Mm.
his. I don't know how true that is. He could be making this up, right? But one interesting thing that I think it was actually my sister that pointed it out. She was like, Butch Ware has more followers than a lot of the candidates that are in this race. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting, actually. So I
Hmm.
not to I just wrote a thing on conspiracy theories. I'm not trying to go down that route around conspiracy theories, but sometimes I'm like, is there a little bit of foul play here? But um, let's just say that the system itself is set up in a way to often make third-party candidates irrelevant anyway. So it's not
Oh
much
yeah.
foul play you have to run in order to basically make third-party candidates
I mean,
just
if nothing else, I feel like you can see the influence that the you can see how politics actually works in the rise of Becerra because
mhm,
he was not polling well
right.
before,
Yeah.
and then Swalwell disappeared, and the consultant class apparently chose their new candidate, and suddenly the dude jumped up like 10
Totally.
points.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. Two last comments. The first comment is
Talk
the
about
first
elections all
comment
night.
is that I've noticed that there is, as I was driving, I think there was a sign for the Ortega campaign that was taking a shot at the Israni campaign. I don't know if you've seen that,
Possibly. I don't think so,
but
no.
which I thought was interesting because maybe I was just trying to think of what the political calculus is there. Like maybe, it's like trying to sneak into that top two candidate.
Oh, it's
There's
crab
also
bucketing all the way.
yeah, there's also like 2 elections, right? One is a special election, so you have to vote
True.
twice.
But
So I'm not
Israni and Ortega, I don't think are in the special election. I'd have to double check my ballot to be sure. Well, I sealed it, but I have to double check Cal Matters or something to be sure. But I don't think they are.
Oh, interesting. Well,
Tom Wong is though.
Oh. So anyway, I just thought that was really I just thought that was really interesting. I was like, oh wait, is that? And I did. To be fair, I was driving, and it was a quick glance, so I could have missed. You know, it might have been something actually that wrong. You know, that I'm saying here that I didn't actually see. But I was like, and if I remember correctly, it was like Israni funds right wing something. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting.
It's because she had given to some right wing candidates a few years back. That's one of her like Achilles heels. I don't think I don't know how much play it's getting, but it is true.
Yeah,
allegedly.
Though, you know, I guess the polling doesn't put Israni very high anyway. So
I mean, the hard part about some of these local races is that people don't run polls. Like the only poll I had seen at the time was a Working Families Party's poll, and like Wahab polled really high, but she also got endorsed by Working Families Party.
Sure,
so.
yeah. Their base is probably leans towards Wahab anyway. Right?
Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, and then then the second thing, and I promise I'll shut up about the the elections here. Damn, what was the second thing? Well, I guess there is no second thing. It was related to the governor consulting class winning, selecting Becerra. Hey, look at that. We're moving on to the next subject here. So, Colin, we're going to transition to the interview with John from AFSC. Talk a little bit about.
You want to transition? because I wrote a story about the first public engagement meeting for AB 481. So that is available on the Hayward Herald. You can read that to get some stuff. I'm certain you'll be asking questions that are use that as some research material to ask questions of John.
Well, actually, it would be good to know how that meeting went, because I didn't get the community engagement meeting. Has there been a community engagement meeting for this year?
Technically, yes. They are counting the regular meeting of the Council Public Safety Committee as their public engagement session.
Okay.
Which is one of those things where it technically meets it, but it meets the letter of the law, but not the spirit.
Gotcha. Well, that is a good segue, because we do talk a little bit about what counts as what, and it seemed you'll see from our conversation kind of it could be worse in terms of the way this AB 481 is being carried out. 481, yeah. But it seems like at the very least, there's some things that Hayward is doing correctly in terms of its reporting, right? So yeah, we'll jump into that conversation with John, but I did want to give you a chance to weigh in at all if you had any thoughts around the current process. I know that this presentation from the police department was pretty buried deep in another report to the city council, so it was a little tricky to find. Luckily, a friend shot it over to me in an email. I was like, here it is. I was like, thank you. I could not find it.
Yeah, again, because of how our open meetings work, they do tick a lot of the boxes of these public engagement sessions, but it does not meet the spirit of the law. But it does technically count, so I can't say they're doing anything wrong, technically. But as far as I'm concerned, I mean, it's hard right now because I think the only thing that's saving us from having a lot more investment in the police is that the city has a very tight budget right now. The Dronus First Responder program is almost certainly going to happen because it's difficult to find reasons not to be against it for most of the city council, because it's not impacting the general fund, and they can say it's improving response times, and they can say it's helping fire. they also outlined in the meeting, I didn't go into detail about it, but there's a bunch of safeguards involved that are, again, they're meeting all the current policies and all these other things. So it's supposed to be more secure. And I still don't like it because I don't like drones. I don't like the potential for the mass surveillance. And I also know that policies are only as good as the people who follow them. And it's not like we have a fully robust local news outlet to be keeping an eye on and digging into and keeping an eye on the police. So, but I think it's going to happen just because I think there's just not enough arguments, not enough reasons for most of the, especially the moderate city council members, to be against it.
Well,
Yeah.
Colin, I think we'll jump into the next segment, which is our interview. Today, we're joined by John Lindsay-Poland of the American Friends Service Committee. The AFSC has been monitoring police militarization across the state for several decades now, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe John will correct me on how long exactly they've been doing that work for. But he's the co-director of AFSC's California Healing Justice Program, focusing on demilitarization and human rights here in the US, but also abroad in Latin America for at least 30 years. He's the co-author of Care First, Jails Last, a policy that was adopted in Alameda County, as well as local legislation on militarized equipment used by police here in the Bay Area, specifically in Oakland and Berkeley. Welcome to the show, John. Thanks so much for being here with us. How are you doing?
All right. Yeah, thanks, Nestor. It's really great to be with you. I'm so glad you guys are doing this podcast.
Thanks. Yeah, and I know that you have just returned from some travels abroad, and so we really appreciate you taking the time to come and discuss with us, especially with our listeners and viewers in the city of Hayward and here locally in East Bay, a little bit about not just this AB number 481 report that the city of Hayward just recently presented at the Hayward City Council, but also this sort of larger question of police militarization in the state and maybe across the country and around the world. And so maybe we can start there is why should folks, like, for example, in the city of Hayward, be concerned with things like police militarization or the police using funds to purchase high-grade military equipment? We'll go into the details in a second, but why is that something that I think that you think Hayward residents should be concerned about, or at least take interest in?
Well, the police department, like everywhere, not just in Hayward, they act in the name of and using the funds of the community. And they have lethal force. They have authorization and they have the weapons to both use lethal force, take someone's life, but also be out in the community in ways that can intimidate, can really harm people, even short of taking someone's life. It can be very scary. And because they operate in the name of the public good, they need to be accountable. And there's really the community that should set the line of, okay, what's okay and what is not okay. And, that's a conversation that people in the community have. Not everybody agrees. But at the very least, there should be that conversation and there should be that accountability. And that's how we've been using AB 481, this fairly new state law, to help communities really engage, get more transparency, figure out what police are doing, how they're authorized to use these weapons, and say what they want.
Yeah, and maybe to go into a little bit of AB 481, the report, if I'm not mistaken, or at least the law requires the city governments, is that correct, to do an annual report on either use of military equipment and acquisition of military equipment. Is that correct?
Yeah, so state law AB 481 was passed in 2021 in California, and it requires every law enforcement agency in the state to report on the militarized equipment they have. And that's defined fairly broadly. This is not just stuff that police get from the Pentagon. It's acquired from anything as long as it qualifies as military equipment under the law. So that includes drones and robots, armored vehicles, assault weapons, chemical agents like tear gas, impact projectiles, often called rubber bullets, also other types of equipment as well. And every year, the law enforcement agency, so not the city council, but the law enforcement agency, is required to make a public report on what they have and how they've used it. They're also required to have a use policy for all of that stuff that is publicly posted and has to be approved by the city council. And that use policy includes things like what is the authorized use, what is the purpose of it, what is the training required, how much does it cost, what's a description of the material, what are the procedures that the agency has to go through in order to use it, what's the independent entity that will hold them accountable around those policies. And then the city council has to certify that those policies, and this is every year, that those policies meet certain standards, that they protect civil rights, that they are needed in order to, there's no alternative to meet the same public safety objective, that they're cost effective. And that is an annual process. So that has to come before the city council. The police department is also required to have a public facing meeting, a community meeting that is well publicized and is easily accessible, where the public can talk about, well, or ask questions about the use of that stuff. So that's the context of the law.
Thanks. Yeah, that's helpful, I think, for our not just our listeners, but myself. That who every year is I'm like, is that what are the details of that law again? And is that and you talked a little bit about who then does the enforcement of it. So is it ultimately fall on the city council to make sure that the law enforcement agency is covering every aspect of the law, including the community engagement meeting that is required by the law, and it is ultimately is the city council that body that is making sure that they're
everything
they need to be.
I mean, the community can call for, the community can say, hey, you didn't post this, or you didn't publicize this, or this policy is too wide open, or I'm concerned about how you've used things, or this is a waste of money. I mean, the community and the city council are really the ones who have to hold the police accountable in that way.
Yeah.
There's the law doesn't have in it a way to litigate. So even agencies that are not complying, and most agencies have some ways in which they're not complying with completely, there's not an avenue for litigation unless it's been used in a way, and then someone could then litigate because of that use.
Yeah, gotcha. Thanks. That's helpful to sort of understand. And I think in terms of getting into the details of the report, and we can speak, I think, specifically about either the Hayward report or just sort of generally. There seems to be at least also in the Hayward report, and maybe a little bit more broad, there seems to be this shift towards the acquisition of drones and the deployment of drones. So from the Hayward report, there's been at least 62 deployments of drones and for 61 incidents. And I believe that part of the report also has what they intend to acquire in the next year. And if I'm not mistaken, there was more drones in that in what they expect to acquire in the next year. Why this shift towards drones? And I think maybe it sort of opens up another avenue of discussion that we could have touched on earlier, which is, does any of this military equipment actually make us safer, or is this spending money that the police have to spend on new toys?
Well, Hayward PD is not alone in increasing its reliance on drones across all of law enforcement. And, the technology has developed. And I think that's part of it, is that a lot of police are taking advantage of relatively inexpensive drones. And they like it because they can see things, they can use it for surveillance, they can go to a site without having to expose themselves. And so that, drones and robots to some extent as well. I would say Hayward PD has not invested as heavily as some agencies. They do want to get 6 more drones in the coming year. But they haven't, like some agencies have been, police departments have been increasing their use of drones progressively over the last 3-4 years. Hayward has been fairly consistent so far, but the interest in acquiring more drones does indicate that they want to use them more. Sometimes that it's because the drones become defunct. They have to replace them all the time. They break, the software goes out of date. And there was also something that the Trump administration did in January, where they made illegal the acquisition of new drones that are Chinese manufactured. So there's a lot of drones that police have gotten are manufactured by this company called DJI, and those are becoming illegal to acquire, at least new ones. And so some agencies are looking to get US manufactured drones. That's the case of Hayward. They want to get these drones that are manufactured by this US company called Skydio. But there's a deeper thing here, which is I think a lot of police have really crappy relationships with their communities. A lot of them don't live in the community, and a lot of people don't trust them. They have a bad rep, and partly because they've done a lot of bad things, and they have held accountable when they do those bad things. So I think a lot of police departments have just kind of given up on improving the relationship with the community. And so they're using these tools that are at a remove instead of investing more heavily in, like, okay, how do we really connect to do things that we're supposed to be doing in connection with the community. They're investing in things that are totally, they're just like, we're not going to connect with the community. We're just going to watch them from afar in a way that we can't be seen. And so that's, I think, something to really interrogate and really look at. And there's another piece of context here, which is crime as measured by police is going down. That's true in Hayward. It's true all over the United States. And I don't think it's really because of the growing police, presence. It's not, there's not much evidence that policing has led to reductions in homicides, reductions in burglaries, reductions in assaults, reductions even in rapes in many communities. So that's also something to look at. It's like, what has Hayward done to reduce these things? Is it, maybe it's investment in services. Maybe it's other types of investments that have really helped the community to reduce harms in the community that would otherwise lead to policing.
Yeah, because I mean, I could see on the one hand the argument where I think at least it was framed in this report as the drones or the unmanned air. What is it? Unmanned air. The drones. That there's this argument that they are sort of a first responder, right? And I think when we tend to think, like, if I were to quickly change my hat in my personal life, I do a lot of, or my professional life, I should say, I do a lot of health and safety in the workplace. And from that perspective, it's sort of like maybe it's a health and safety issue for certain folks. I think right now there's an incident happening in Southern California where a drone system, right, with the chemical leak that's happening might be a good way to assess the risk and how, so from that perspective, it does sound like there is a use for these things, but I think in the policing sort of use, it always seems like it's more a question of surveillance, a question of are able to make arrests without putting police officers in harm's way, which you could maybe argue that there's some benefit to that. But it does seem like we moved away from the argument of community policing and making sure that there are police officers that know their community, that are respected in their communities. So it does, and then I think we layer that with, I think some of the fears around AI use and just the continuous introduction of digital technologies into every aspect of our life. People are maybe paranoid for good reason. So can you speak a little bit more about one of the things that I was interested in speaking with you and learning a little bit more about is the ammunition. I think there's also detailed in the report is the ammunition that was used and acquired, and some of it is very, for lack of a better word, just scary sounding, right? It sounds like very stuff that could be used in warfare, right?
Well, yeah, Hayward PD has 2 submachine guns, and they're made by this company called Heckler & Koch. They're known as MP5s. They can fire 900 rounds a minute.
Wow.
So they have a capability of fully automatic fire, and that's just disturbing. They have not reported any use of them. They train with them. And so they have some officers who are training with submachine guns. Sometimes a lot of agencies, and I don't know whether this would be a question to ask Hayward PD, is when they report on use, a lot of police departments and sheriffs are saying use is when we fire it. Use is not when we go out and deploy with it and don't fire it. So if the SWAT team goes out and they've got their assault rifles and they've also got their sniper rifles and they've also got their submachine gun, their MP5, is that considered a use or not? I suspect because there were no reported uses of those rifles, any of those assault rifles in the last year, that they're only reporting when they fire it outside of training. And that's really a misleading, the state law doesn't make reference to use of force. It makes reference to use.
Mm-hmm.
And the context of that is really like, okay, when you're going out in the community and you're deploying with these things, that's a use. But a lot of agencies are not reporting that at all. So it does look like the rifles, the most of the ammo that they're using and replacing is in training. There were 2 uses, that is firings of rifles, not the submachine gun, in 2024. And it's unclear exactly. It was on a SWAT team operation. Not entirely clear whether somebody was hit. I mean, we would have to look further to see if, what were the circumstances of that. But, this law is supposed to make that all transparent and make the community meetings spaces where the community can say, well, okay, what was that? What happened here?
Mm-hmm.
And were there other things that could have been done instead?
Right. Yeah, I'm seeing that there is a part of the report, at least from the presentation that the public was able to view, is that there's a there's a dollar amount also associated with either the acquisition, training, and maintenance of it. And so with like, just looking at the shotgun slugs, it looks like $17,000, roughly $17,460 was used on breaching apparatus and shotgun slugs training, which, it's also maybe this is something else you could speak to is the way that it's presented, at least from just my read here, is that the budget or the spending for this military equipment only makes up 0.66% of the budget. It's not, I don't know if this is the argument that's being made, but to me, it sort of comes off as like, don't worry about it. It's a very, very small, less than 1% of the budget. Like, the impact is fiscally is not huge, right? How does this compare to other cities in the Bay Area or across the state in terms of the amount of money that's going towards military equipment and, as part of a larger sort of budget for cities and other localities?
Just a second. Well, first we should say that Hayward PD does something that I like in their report, which is they report on personnel costs, including for training. Most agencies, even though they're required to by the state law, they don't do it. They report on what the acquisition is. They might report on the cost of a training course. And in the case of Hayward PD, they are reporting some estimate. We don't know how accurate it is, but they're giving an estimate of, I think it's more than $700,000 that includes the personnel costs. And it's almost 700,000. I think it's about 675,000. And so that's a significant amount of money, even if it's compared to the Hayward PD budget. It's not a lot, but the police department is a big part of the city budget. It's a very big part of the city budget. And so, to say, oh, this is only a small percentage of the overall departmental budget kind of eludes the question of, is this a good investment of money? Because the other thing is that, you mentioned that there's all this expenditure on breaching slugs and shotgun cartridges, and they didn't use them. So breaching equipment is when the police blow open doors. That's what it's for. So, right, somebody is inside somewhere. It could be a rescue operation, but generally it's also like somebody who is a so-called barricaded subject, which just means the police want to get them. They want to arrest them. They're locked inside. They might have a weapon, which could be a knife. I live in a house with a knife. Like if I have a warrant for my arrest and I don't want the police to come in, I have my door locked. Most people lock their doors. I have a knife in my house. Most people have a knife in their house. I could be considered a barricaded subject. It sounds so scary, right? It sounds like, oh, somebody has taken somebody hostage and they've got a gun to their head. But actually, it depends on the department. But a lot of departments define barricaded subject in such a way that it could be a lot of different situations. In any case, in those situations, they can blow open a door. And that's what they're explosives that come under military equipment in AB 41. They're called breaching equipment. And most departments don't use them. They use them very rarely. And in the case of Hayward PD, they have not used them in the last 4 years. So they're training with them and they're using the stuff. And when they use it in training, they replace it. And that costs money. But, you could make the argument that breaching equipment hasn't been used in the last 4 years. The robot that they have two robots. They haven't used it in the last 2 years. They haven't used flashbangs in the last 2 years. They haven't used their command control vehicle at all in the last 2 years. These are big, they're kind of like, Winnebago type vehicles that are remodeled for police use. They pack a lot of equipment inside them. They haven't used it at all. So you can make the argument, well, maybe this isn't the best use of money by the department, even if it's a small percentage of the overall department budget.
Yeah, and maybe when we're talking about robots, what exactly are we talking about here? We're not talking Terminator movie here. Are we talking smaller sort of?
In the case of the Hayward PD, they have two of them. It's battery operated. It's it can walk. But it's not huge. It costs they cost $30,000 each. They're supposed to be used like in a high risk incident to go in somewhere, open doors, and see. So they have remote video on them. So it's sort of like a drone, but it doesn't fly. In the sense, in terms of its function.
Yeah.
But the authorized uses for both the drones and the robots in Hayward are pretty broad. They're they're really at the discretion of the department. And that's something I think, would be important to kind of say, this is too broad. People are very concerned now about automatic license plate readers like the flock cameras, as we should be. And it's part of a whole system, right? It's a part of the data then is often combined in ways within an agency, right? So Hayward has robots, they have drones. If they have other kinds of camera systems, they can bring that data together in order to create a bigger, more comprehensive picture of people's behavior. That could be driving around, it could be around their home. And then that gets combined with other agencies who are also surveilling, right? And that's the flock scenario, where all this data gets put together. You can consult another agency's data, and you have this much more big brother scenario. So I think that's something that should really be interrogated, is like, well, okay, you have these drones and robots. What kind of restrictions are there on when you use them, in what circumstances you use them, and how long does the footage get kept? If it's for a criminal case, then state law says you have to keep it. But if it's not going to be used for a criminal case, it should be destroyed. How soon is it destroyed?
Yeah, and I guess this brings up another question around surveillance and is how much, for example, I don't think I saw anything that would suggest the use of AI, but would AI be even considered part of this military equipment, or would that be?
No, AI is not covered by AB 481. So AI would be a separate tool, right? So AI might be used to process the footage that is gathered through drones or ALPRs or robots in order to say, okay, can we put this together with other things we have? Could be in the public domain. It could be other law enforcement agency footage in order to do facial recognition or things like that. So AI would be a tool that's applied to what is gathered through these military equipment tools like drones and robots.
Well, John, is there something that I know we talked a little bit about the question that maybe Hayward residents or just any sort of concerned person who lives in a city that has a law enforcement agency, which is everyone basically, right? There's a question of are these wise investments? Is this actually keeping us safe? What's actually reducing crime? Is there anything else that AFC is sort of thinking about in terms of policing and military equipment, or places that you all think that cities should be looking at closely in order for to either increase transparency or accountability with police force?
Well, two things. One is we have American Friends Service Committee has a web page that focuses on this, and we have lots of different tools on it. So it's afsc.org/AB481. And we have toolkits, we have, little training videos, we have, resources about what is required in an annual report, what are the responsibilities of elected officials, how to engage on these reports, because they're very technical. And so I think a lot of people are intimidated by that. But there's requirements that the city has. And so that's one resource, afsc.org/AB481. The other thing I would say is that, Hayward PD published their report in April. They had a meeting. It was not very well publicized, apparently. There was a city council hearing. It was kind of buried in a lot of different city council materials. So this annual process is supposedly done for the year, but that doesn't mean that people in Hayward can't contact city council members and say, hey, or the PD, and say, hey, I'd like to know more about this. I have some questions. We'd be happy to work with people in order to, sort of develop some kind of engagement with the city council. One of the important things about AB 481 is that these decisions have been historically in the hands of cops, right? They are making the decisions without any transparency. AB 481 says, actually, these decisions should be in the hands of the community and of elected officials. There's going to be proposals, there's going to be propaganda coming from the police department, but the civilian elected officials are the ones who really should set policy and ask the questions and engage the community, and they should be representing the community in that respect. So that it's AB 41 is like a container for civilian control of police, at least on these issues of militarized equipment. And that's an opportunity for us in the community to say to members of the city council, I want you to be on this. I want you to ask questions about it. Even if it's not on your agenda next meeting, I want you to engage the police department about it, because this is concerning to me. And we'd be happy to work with people on that. I know Hayward Community Coalition has worked on that in the past, and can also be a partner on that. So it's just going to keep going in the direction it goes unless we in the community really engage on it.
So thanks, John. I'll link the website you shouted out to the show notes, and folks can check that out if they want to learn more or want to get involved. And there's some various groups in the Bay Area that are working on these issues, including AFSC, but also the Hayward Community Coalition and other organizations. So if folks are interested in learning more about that, we'll include those in the show notes. Thanks so much, John, for taking the time to talk to us and give us a little bit more information on some of this.
Thank you, Nestor.
So that was our interview with John from AFSC, talking about the military equipment use report. Thanks so much, Colin, for another fantastic episode over the loudspeaker, and for joining us. And do we expect a lot of summer news coming out?
We'll hope so. We're trying to maybe going to get some volunteers, so hopefully we'll be having a little more on the ground news. We'll see what happens, but the news doesn't stop, and council doesn't even end session until the end of June, so there's still a lot of work ahead. Over the loudspeaker, we'll probably take a short break. If we could squeeze in one more episode, we'll try to do that, but I'm going to go on vacation in June, so we'll see if we're able to squeeze one more in. Yeah, Colin, you're like, sure you are. I'll be recording live from the beach in that case. Heck yeah.
And if you are, of course, a subscriber, thank you so much. If you're a subscriber to the YouTube channel, thanks again. If you're not, please hit that bell button so you get notified for when an episode comes out, and give us a little follow, a little subscription on both the newsletter and the YouTube's website, and of course share it with your friends and neighbors in the city of Hayward.
All right, we'll see you around, everybody.
All right, thanks everyone.